got to read that stuff for ourselves.
Absolutely. You have to read it for yourself, and it's available too. I mean, it's incredible with the internet and how much access we have now that never was possible before. You have more access to the kind of stuff that scholars would work on in the 1800s now than even imaginable. So I strongly encourage everyone to do that. Shifting once again, because there's just such a breadth of topics that you cover in this book, and we couldn't finish this interview without addressing one of the most difficult issues, which is a form of the problem of evil, and it's about hell, particularly. How can conservative, traditional, Orthodox Christians say that they believe in a loving God who sends some to hell? And again, this is one of those major redefinitions in progressive Christianity that happens.
Yeah.
What do progressive Christians say about hell?
In the progressive world, as far as I can tell, there's really not a meaningful sense of eschatology. So most progressive Christians are, in some kind of a broad sense, universalists. In Rob Bell's book Love Wins, everybody remembers that was such a lightning rod book at the time. He was asking a lot of questions that were suggesting that maybe we've gotten this doctrine wrong. Maybe there isn't this eternal place of punishment called hell. But even in his book, when he thought about, well, what is hell mean in the afterlife, because he was sort of relegating it all to the now. It's like, it's when you suffer, it's when you go through things now. And he said, well, maybe it's just more of that, but he didn't say much about it. And that was essentially, what he was talking about. So in the progressive world, and I think we saw this come into the evangelical church really through the book, The Shack. And a lot of Christians were kind of scratching their heads like, well, it's a novel, so I'm not going to make any judgments on what the theology is, but they had red flags. Well, a few years later, William Paul Young came out with a book called Lies We Believe About God, and sort of fleshed out the theology that informed The Shack. And in that, he admits outright that he believes that no one is going to be punished in hell. And he doesn't call himself a universalist, I believe, but something more along the lines of universal reconciliation. So that's a view you'll see a lot in the progressive church, that yes, Jesus is the one who reconciles humans to God, but he did it for everyone, whether they ever hear his name or know him or not. And so it's largely universalist, and that's kind of the view of hell in the progressive church, is that if there is a hell, it's probably just the consequences of the bad choices we make here on earth.
Hmm. And so then what would you say is the traditional doctrine of hell that Christians need to be aware of and defend?
Well, a lot of people, again, this is why you got to read the primary sources and things, but a lot of people will say that the idea that hell is eternal, the idea that it's a place of punishment, and that you'll be conscious there, is not the historic view. And but this has been debunked by a theologian. I think it was Gary Habermas. I'm flipping through my book because it's been a while since I read this chapter, but he's arguing universalism was not the primary view. In fact, it was very controversial when Origen was sort of bringing some of these ideas about, and there's some debate over whether or not he was actually excommunicated or how that all went. But this was not something that was accepted by the church, and so throughout church history, historically, Christians have affirmed this idea that hell is punishment, it's eternal, and you will be conscious there.
Mm.
And the nature of that is debated a bit. Is the fire literal or metaphorical, or the worms metaphorical or literal? And so here I have a quote from Richard Bauckham, who said, until the 19th century, and he's a well-known New Testament scholar, until the 19th century, almost all Christian theologians taught the reality of eternal torment in hell. Here and there, outside the theological mainstream, we have some who believe that in annihilationism or something along those lines, but even fewer were advocates of this type of universal salvation. And so it's just not true that it was the historic view of the church. But I also think, though, if you ask somebody in the progressive church, what do you think hell is? I think you're going to get some misconceptions about the biblical doctrine. I certainly had some misconceptions that I even write about quite kind of humorously in my book
Mm.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something there's yeah, I mean, in the apologetics community, you have those that are defending universalism, you have those that are defending conditionalism, that is a form of just going to hell, experiencing bodily death, and then you're not conscious for eternity. But it's important to, I think, defend the majority approach of the Christian tradition, and that is of bodily punishment. Um, because we're humans made of spirit and body, and we need to see that unity
Yeah.
all throughout scripture is there. Well,
Yeah.
as we come to wrap up that portion of the interview, I want to shift here just to talk about what it's meant for you as an author, as a mother. You interweave all these stories about being a mother, listening to these podcasts, listening to these lectures, and doing so with your kids in the car. What would you say to those out there that go, wow, that's so much data you just learned and wrote about? I don't have any time to consume material like that.
Yeah, and that's a fair question because we're busy people, right? And especially if you're a mom and you're just you got something to do every 5 seconds. I didn't do a lot of reading of physical books in the beginning. I did a lot of listening because I couldn't. My kids were a baby and a toddler when this was going on, and so I listened to tons of seminary classes, audio. I listened to audio books. I listened to lectures and podcasts, and so I think that I think is one thing you can that just to release people. Like, you don't have to like sit down and read a physical book
Mm.
every single time. I think it's great to do that, and I'm able to do that more now than I was before. But you can always find some time to listen to something in the car or while you're doing dishes or while you're doing laundry. That's kind of how I went about it. My friend Natasha Crane, who has a apologetics blog for parents, she'll read physical books like in line at the grocery store. I can't do that. I can't focus like that. But she's kind of got this amazing mind. She probably can do that. But I think, yeah, just listening to a little something here and there, to even listening to the Bible. We have the ability. We live in a technological age where we can listen to the Bible. That's amazing. And so take advantage of some of that, and the time that you might have, even if it's just 15 minutes here and there.
Mm.
But I don't want this to come off harsh, but we have time for Netflix and stuff. So we can make time for this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the next question I have to ask is what some would say, is it really worth the effort? It's hard. And okay, you were in a class with progressive Christians. I don't know any progressive Christians. Why should I get into studying all these things if I'm not being asked these questions?
Well, I would have a couple of responses to that. First, I would say you probably are interacting with it more than you realize. And I think that's something a lot of Christians are really shocked to learn is when they read one of my blog posts or listen to a podcast, they go, "Oh my gosh, I heard this and I didn't know what it was called, and now I have language for it." So I think you're probably interacting with it more than you may realize. But the second thing I would say might surprise you, because I am trying to get my book about progressive Christianity into the hands of people, but I would say you don't actually have to study progressive Christianity to be armed against it. Learn the real thing, study your Bible, get some really good Bible teaching, read some good apologetics books. And that way, when the counterfeit comes across, you will spot it immediately. But if you think you might be interacting with the ideas of progressive Christianity, of course, my book will help give you language and answers for that. But I would say more than anything, Christians just need to know what the real thing is, and then they're not going to be tricked by a counterfeit.
Absolutely. All of those that think, oh, well, I'm not engaging with this or interacting with this. You probably are. And even if you aren't, be prepared before it comes up. You do
Yeah.
not want to be caught without an answer. First Peter 3:15 says we have to be able to give a reason for the hope that we have. And this book will equip you to do that. So again, thank you so much for coming on the radio with us today. Would you close by sharing where people can get in contact with you and perhaps any more upcoming work that you have in the future?
Yeah, so I am really hoping to get people to pre-order the book because it gets it into the hands of more people. It gets it across the screens of more people. And so we're offering a couple of bonuses. If you pre-order the book until October 6th at midnight, you're going to get the first two chapters within 24 hours of that. So you'll get the first two, you'll get to start reading the book early. And the second bonus is you'll have access to a private Facebook book club group that I'm leading. I'm going to read through the book over 6 weeks with weekly live streams. There's
Wow.
almost 1,000 people in the group already, and they're having a blast finding each other, like-minded people. Love to get everybody in there. You can go to Alisa Childers / Another Gospel for all of that information on how to pre-order and how to get your bonuses. Alisa Childers / Another Gospel.
Alisa Childers / Another Gospel. Go on Amazon, pre-order the book. It's called Another Gospel, and please check it out. Thank you so much, Alisa, for being here with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be back in 30 minutes with another interview with Glenna Marshall. So please continue listening. And you're listening to 100.1 Remnant Radio, the radio station of your life. We'll be back in just a few minutes.